Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to our weekly sermonette. It's so hard to believe that Shabbos is almost here and a week has gone by. Someone once told me the other day that hours go slow and days go slow, but weeks go fast. So here we are again, meeting each other before Shabbos. And if anyone can please just message me on the comments below or on my text, make sure our sound is on. That'll be great. In the meantime, let me invite you all to our new website that has all our Shavuos ideas, the Festival of Shavuot. Another holiday is coming around the corner, not this coming Sunday night, but a week from Sunday night. And you can go onto our website, jewishcenter.info/Shavuot. Make sure you do a T at the end. Shavuos with the S will get you to a general Shavuot site. But if you want to know specifically the programs that we're having here in Bucks County, in Yardley, Doylestown, and here in Newtown, go to our site, jewishcenter.info. See a lot of comments here. Great. Sound is okay. jewishcenter.info/Shavuot. And you'll see a lot of exciting things before Shavuos and after and during the holiday. Come and join in if you're able to. And of course, as always, if you're still in the, in the phase that you still want to isolate and not be with crowds, let us know. And we will make sure that you can have what you need to celebrate the festival of Shavuos at home. And you can always email me at rys@jewishcenter.info. I look forward to hearing from you if you need any help for Shavuos. So, my dear friends, as always, we're about to begin our sermonette, and I want to encourage you that if while I'm speaking you have a question, please don't hesitate to put it into the comments, or you can text me or email, and as soon as we're done, I will entertain one question from the crowd. And in addition, I have a very big favor from all of you, so at the end I will ask you that favor, and hopefully you will respond accordingly. So, last Shabbos, last Friday night, or not Friday night, but Friday afternoon, we discussed the idea of faith in the light, in the aftermath of what was very raw at that time, the tragedy in Meron. And on Shabbos, I continued the conversation in Shul during the sermon, and many people asked me to share what I said in Shul on Shabbos so that they can share it with their friends via our pre-Shabbos sermonette. And of course, as this is still raw in our minds, in our feelings, in our hearts, and as we prepare for the festival of Shavuos, I think it is extremely appropriate that we begin to discuss and we spend a little time talking about faith, questioning God. Because after all, Shavuos is a celebration of a relationship with God. We don't just have a God that we believe in that is detached and remote and disconnected from our experience, as we discussed last week. Shavuos is about a relationship. In fact, the metaphor for the festival is like a wedding ceremony. So in a relationship, we need sometimes to have some important and serious conversations, not just to push things under the rug. And when something hurts, we need to be able to discuss it. And so it is in our relationship with God. So let me begin with a joke, which is not such a joke in this case. In the olden days, I think it's before my times, although I think I got the end of that era, when a teacher wanted to reprimand a student, they wouldn't just say, "Hey, Moshe, come, let's understand your feelings. How can we make things better?" The kid was misbehaving. They got what we call a patch, a clap. Everyone knows about the little stick, the little belt, or the little ruler in the teacher's office, in the teacher's desk. And when you didn't behave, you had a little hit. So there's two kids that were misbehaving. One was the one that was instigating and causing the trouble. We'll call him Yankel. So the teacher calls over Yankel to the desk, puts his hand on the desk, and gives him a hit with the ruler on the desk. And he's in such pain, and he starts crying, and he starts acting up. Well, we know a couple hours after my Yankel got home, guess what? The teacher gets a phone call from his mother. He says, how dare you do that? He says, what do you mean? He wasn't behaving and I needed to reprimand him and discipline him. So we don't understand. My son is so sensitive and he's such a well-meaning child. Why do you have to hit him? If you want to teach him a lesson, hit the kid next to him and he'll learn the lesson from the kid next to him. And maybe in school and in discipline, this is a joke. Hit the other kid and this kid will get away with it. But in our religion, in our Jewish community, when pain strikes, when suffering hits one part of our community, although it doesn't hit us physically, but emotionally, we feel the same pain. And what happened in Meron and what happened in Israel, and as we've even watched this entire week and hear all the different stories of the broken families, it's something that is painful for us as well. And therefore, it has to teach us a lesson. Their pain needs to teach us a lesson because their pain is our pain. And this is a very interesting and deep wound that happened in Meron. Very unusual and very different than many of the sufferings that our people have had over the last decades or even generation. Very different and therefore very deep. It wasn't an act of anti-Semitism. It wasn't a terrorist activity. It wasn't people that are anti-Semitic trying to destroy the Jewish people. And therefore, even if there's an act of anti-Semitism in France, in Europe, in Israel, in South Africa, it hurts us, or in California, or in Pittsburgh, wherever it may be, even it hurts us. But this wasn't an act of anti-Semitism. It wasn't even the act of a lunatic who went crazy and shot every person like we discussed last week. This is an act of God. People were going up to Mount Meron to celebrate a spiritual experience. And nobody individually caused this to happen. It was circumstances that are caused by God. And therefore, this goes to the very core of our faith, that we can't blame it or on a situation. And the only question is, why did God allow that to happen? This goes so much deeper, because in this case, God made it happen. And therefore, the challenge to our faith, the struggles that we always have, are reopened. Because unfortunately, throughout our history, this wasn't a question we asked only once or twice. Throughout our history, when tragedy at such a magnitude hits our people, the question is always, where's God? What kind of God would allow this? This cuts to the very core of our faith. And sometimes we just answer those questions and we move on. This seems to have opened this wound again. And the question, of course, is, how do we deal with this type of situation? And being around the time of Shavuos, when we receive the Torah, it's very important for us to understand that the Torah is not just a book of wisdom. It's not just a book of knowledge. It's not just a book of, let's call it, intellectual stimuli. It's not data. Torah guides us in life. And the wisdom of knowledge shouldn't just make us smarter people, but it informs us as well on how to have faith. So although Torah is called Chachma, it is wisdom, but it is wisdom that allows us to develop a concept called faith. Now, how does that work? Isn't faith something you don't understand? And this is the crucial element that we need to understand. That faith is not just ignorance. Just ignore what happened, and ignorance is bliss. Just believe. As we said last week, faith, true faith, encourage you to question. So faith is not just suppressing a question. Faith is not just suppressing the reality and suspend yourself from any intellectual inquiry into this idea. That's not what faith is. Faith is a tool. It's a powerful tool that allows us and trains us how to deal with things that transcend our understanding. And that always happens in our life. Throughout life, things happen, either to us individually, as a community, as a Jewish people, things that we just don't understand how it can happen. Like last week in Meron. It transcends our understanding. There's no way that we're not even allowed to, but certainly we shouldn't even try to excuse or try to find a reason why that happened. It transcends our understanding. And there's two ways that we can react to something that is so overwhelming and overpowering that it transcends our understanding. And that is, one, we can be crushed by it. We just fall apart because our mind just can't grasp it. And since mind in most of human experience is supreme, therefore we just fall apart and we're crushed. Or we can have faith. And faith is the ability to deal with an issue when your mind cannot deal with it. Faith is not to say the ability to say forget about it. Faith is the ability to deal with it in a positive and constructive way. And as we mentioned last week, faith from Torah, and this is how the Torah, and this is the wisdom of Torah that informs us how to believe, because believe and faith is something very powerful that connects us to a certain truth instead of suppressing what our mind really wants. So how does it work? So let me share with you a story that is connected with Shavuot, with the giving of the Torah. And this is a story in the Talmud about two great Jewish leaders. One is none other than Moses, who received the Torah from God on Mount Sinai. The other involves another very important individual who didn't receive the Torah from Mount Sinai, but was so instrumental in teaching the Torah at a very critical time in our history, Rabbi Akiva. And the Talmud tells us as such: when Moses goes up the mountain and he's getting ready to receive Torah, he sees that God is very busy. What is God very busy with? So let me share with you the screen just to give a very brief introduction so that you understand what I'm going to say. If you look at the Hebrew alphabet, you'll notice this is Aleph, Bet, this is a Gimel, this is a Dalet. What is strange about this letter here, the letter of Gimel? What is strange about the letter Gimel is, that's the bottom right. You see there's three things sticking out, three lines with little dots on top. Those are called crowns, the crowns of the letters. Now, not all the letters of the Torah have crowns. Certain Torah letters have these crowns and certain letters don't. So just look at this for like another 3 seconds and understand that some letters in the Torah have these crowns and these little things, little dots on top of that. And that's what we're going to discuss now. So Moses goes up to Mount Sinai, on Mount Sinai, or in heaven, however the metaphor is, and he sees God is very busy. Now, of course, this is a allegory, but the concept is the truth. And he sees what is God busy with, detailing these crowns in the Torah on the different letters and perfecting the crowns on these letters. Moses is saying, God, what's going on? I'm paraphrasing the Talmud story. What's going on, God? You have nothing better to do than to deal with these little embellishments of a letter? Is it really important? The Torah are the words in the Torah. And you can't delegate. If you want the fonts and have a little artistic flair, delegate it to some angel who's an artist. Why are you, God, so engaged in these crowns? And God says, you have a good question. Let me tell you why. Because in the future, there's going to be a great sage who's going to interpret and understand, and through these crowns, the great wisdom behind some of these letters and laws that I teach. And I want to make sure that it's all perfect. See, he tells Moses, these crowns aren't just embellishments of the letters. These crowns contain great wisdom. And there's going to be a sage that is going to interpret this. And I want to make sure it's perfect. Moses says, who's that sage? I'd love to meet him. And he goes down, and God says, let me show him. And he takes him on this little trip. He says, look over there. And he sees there's a sage giving a great lecture, and all the students are engaged, and he's interpreting the crowns and what it means and the significance. And Moses is just amazed. He says, God, what's his name? And God says his name is Akiva. Akiva ben Yosef. Akiva. Rabbi Akiva. And Moses turns to God and says, God, he is such a deep interpreter of your wisdom, of your knowledge. Why don't you give the Torah through him? I'm just kind of don't even reach his ankles. He didn't say that in Talmud, but Moses was humble, says, give it through Akiva. He's such a great scholar and understands your Torah. And what does God tell him? God tells him, Moses, shtok, be silent. Kach Allah b'machshava. Kach Allah b'machshava lefanai. This intention arose before me. So seemingly, Moses, don't ask questions. Just accept. And Moses then turns to God again and says, God, if this is such a great scholar, what is his reward for being so engaged in Torah? And God shows him the end of Akiva. And we all know Rabbi Akiva suffered in the hands of the Roman great torture. His skin was peeled off his body in the fire. It's a very tragic end to his life. And Moses is again astonished. And he turns to God and he says, God, this is your faithful student for whom you are doing all these crowns and interprets the depth of Torah. And this is the reward. This is how he ends his life with such pain and suffering. And God says again to Moses, shtok, be silent. Kachala b'machshava lefanai. This intention arose before me. And he didn't answer Moses. And that's the story. And I have a friend, a colleague of mine, who was sharing the story. And he asked a good question. And he says, this is Moses. This is your agent, so to speak, to the Jewish people. He is the one that's going to teach the Torah to your people. He's the one that's going to guide. He's their shepherd. Can't you give him the ammunition? Because what Moses was asking, it wasn't only his question. This is a question that Jewish people ask not only right away, but throughout history. God, this is commitment to your will, and this is the end? A week ago, thousands of Jews went up to the Mount of Meron to celebrate your Torah, to celebrate your light and your truth, and that's how they have to lose their life? This is not just a question that Moses wants to know for his own intellectual inquiry. He's going to be the leader. He's going to have to lead the Jewish people. Can't God give him a context, at least to help him teach the people for whom God wants? What kind of answer was it from God? Just be quiet. This is the way I decided to do things. That's not the way you would want to train the person who has to teach you, your people. And this is what my colleague offered. That in fact, God did teach Moses. In this answer, God gave Moses the secret or the tool to be able to deal with the issues that sometimes transcend your logic. Because God knew that Moses will be the shepherd of faith, he will have to shepherd his people and guide them through challenging times. God didn't dismiss him. God taught him how to teach the Jewish people to conduct themselves in that time. God didn't say, Moses, why are you asking questions? Don't ask. Don't bother me. Shut up. Don't be a nuisance. I'm showing you things. Mind your own business. God didn't say, don't question. God answered. And he said, I'll answer you. And the way you are able to understand this is through shtok, is through being silent, is through being aware that sometimes the mind won't grasp the truth because what's happening is Allah, b'machshava lefanai, it arose before me. It's from something greater than the human can comprehend. We live in a very small, thin slice of time. When we experience something today, we may not understand the entire context that you see from a higher view, from a higher perspective. We're living on the ground. It's like opening a novel, opening a book and looking at chapter 15 of a 45 chapter book and saying, I don't get it. Well, of course you don't get it. You got to read the beginning and see the end. And that you can only see from a higher and greater perspective of God. So this is what God is telling Moses. I understand your question. And the way you approach this is to be silent at that moment, to silence the question and become aware of a greater reality from where these things all fall into place. It's not something that the human mind will understand, because every time the human mind will try to understand it, you're reducing the event to just a finite, limited human perspective. But sometimes we have to be silent so that we can connect to the greater reality. And that's what emunah, that's what faith is. Faith is not suppressing your question. Faith is not ignoring the reality. Faith is, in a sense, telling us that your questions can only take you so far. And sometimes you have to absorb a greater truth, a greater reality. And here God teaches Moses an important question. Not just how to believe, an important idea. Not just how to believe, but what faith is, but how to question. Jews have always encouraged questioning. There's nothing wrong with asking a question, where is God? Why is this happening? And in fact, if we don't ask that question, it demonstrates a great insensitivity of ours to human life and human suffering. And one of the cardinal things that God wants us to be is sensitive to people's feeling and what they're going through. So we must question. But the idea is, what is that question all about? And how do we live with that question? Because if we can't answer the question, so what do we do? And this is what God and the Torah gives us an incredible, incredible answer. That answering this question is not always through an answer of intellect, but an answer of action. Why did this happen? I don't know, and I cannot know. But how do I answer that question is, although I cannot know, but there's something that I can do. And when there's a place in my life that my mind just cannot grasp, that is a time to go up to a different place, a place of faith that will motivate you to do something. And in this case, to do something, to perpetuate the ideals, what these people were living for, to perpetuate the ideas and the values that these people had. I don't know why it happened, but I know what I can do to internalize their presence in this world. And what I could do to internalize their presence in this world is to try to strengthen in myself the things that they were doing at the moment of their death. And therefore, we're taught question. And we're also taught how to live with the question. You live with the question by understanding that there's something greater that you can't grasp, but there's something greater that you can connect to. And you connect to it not through an intellectual answer, but an answer of action and strengthening within yourself the very core for what they died for. And therefore, I want to leave with this call to action, as we did last Shabbos, last Friday, that over this Shabbos, reflect on a weak point in your spiritual life, on a weak point in your relationship with your tradition, with your faith, with your God. And I'm sure we all have very weak points at this point. I do. We all do. And that's the idea, as we mentioned last week, about faith. Faith is exercise. Faith is the workout. It's activity. Sometimes we're weaker, sometimes we're stronger, but we're always working at it. And therefore, this Shabbos, take one area. It could be Shabbos itself. It could be another Jewish ideal that you're kind of dismissive of. And reassess it, revisit it, explore it, question it, probe it, but live with it, deal with it, enhance it. Because any spiritual or Jewish ideal that we enhance and we strengthen will be the answer to our question of why this happened. Not an intellectual one, but an actionable one. A one that will not only strengthen our own personal life, but will perpetuate the life of those who died a week ago and throughout our history. Shtok. Sometimes we have to silence our mind Because by silencing our mind, we're not saying it, don't ask your question. You're saying be quiet for a moment and absorb the greater reality. I hope we have a memorable Shabbos. I hope we all have a Shabbos that is inspiring. And this prepares us for the coming festival of Shavuos, a festival where we don't just say we're going to receive the Torah and now we're going to study another 5 books of Torah this year. But we're going to try to tune into what is the message, what is the wisdom that the Torah is trying to impart, not just in the wisdom and knowledge, but in the wisdom of faith as well. I encourage you to join our different classes and programs before and during the holiday of Shavuos, so we can draw on the energy of this great festival that not only gives us a little bit increased calories through our dairy diet of cheesecake and ice cream and all the other dairy things that we eat traditionally on this holiday, which you can learn more about on our website, but increases our spiritual caloric intake to be strengthened in our faith and through that in our life and everything that we do. So, my dear friends, it's a time to ask some questions. And while people are trying to put their questions up, or if you just want to wish a good Shabbos, I have a favor to you. One of the things that I know that I personally grew in the past year through the pandemic is this very show and the very interactive way that we study through the YouTube channel, through Facebook, and through these broadcasts. As I've mentioned many times, this is the furthest thing that I would have ever imagined that I would feel comfortable doing, talking to people in this medium. I want to be able to move forward from this pandemic and create a more developed YouTube, Facebook, interactive virtual form of learning so we can continue to connect in this way. I would like you to send me an email at your leisure, and my email address, I believe, is up there, and let me know your ideas. If you've been with us over the year, let me know what you liked, what you would like to see, and what would become a meaningful experience virtually for you. If you let me know what you think, or if you haven't been with us and just joining in today, what are the things that you look for when you tune in for a virtual Torah session? I know one thing I've been told, and that is to try to keep these a little shorter, which I know we'll have to work on. But please, I would love to have constructive criticism. I'd love to tell you what you did like, what you think we should change. I'll be more than happy. And hopefully sooner than later, we'll come up with a very robust, interactive program that we can teach and learn from each other. It's our time for the go-around. Those who want to wish the community good Shabbos, you can type it in onto the comment section. In the meantime, I do see here a question that I will bring up in a second. Let me just type it into the banner, and you will see this in just a moment. Okay, my dear friends, this was a great question from someone called Jill. Okay, so the question here is, actually, you're right. This is it. Just be silent. How about the Jews in the Holocaust in Israel? Shouldn't we fight back? That's actually a very good question. So till now, we're talking about the reaction to things that don't happen is just be silent and absorb the greater reality. Shouldn't we be fighting back when things aren't going well? Just sit back and be silent and accept it? That's a great question. And your questions are really strong and always deserve another lecture. But just in a moment, to do this very quickly, the idea of being silent does not mean being proactive. And it doesn't mean that if you are in the position to fight back, if somebody's fighting you and attacking you, actually, according to Jewish law, if someone is coming to attack you, you have to fight back. And if you feel that they're going to kill you, you have the obligation to kill them first in self-defense. So certainly we don't say that if tragedy strikes or if you have the ability to fight back and to prevent something from happening, you shouldn't. That is what God wants us to do. He wants us to be proactive. We're talking about situations when that isn't even possible, or sometimes in retrospect, when we're questioning a certain situation. So in the moment, we must be proactive and do whatever we can, because we are partners with God. And God wants us to accomplish certain things. And therefore, when we worked hard to prevent, and when we did fight back, but there was a conclusion that doesn't necessarily fit in our comfort zone, and then we ask God, I did what you told me to do, and it didn't work. That's when we have to say the idea of silence. But silence should not and isn't the same as being passive or passivity. Silence just means when your mind cannot grasp why there's a situation that happened, silence the intellectual pursuit for a moment so that you can absorb maybe a greater truth and a greater reality. But that was a great question, Jill. Thanks for sharing that. And now let's go to the good Shabbos greetings. Who do we have up here? Sherry Paul is wishing good. Let me move this so I can see what's going on. Sherry says, good Shabbos to everyone. Good Shabbos to you as well. Michael Rabinowitz, good Shabbos, Rabbi, and everyone. Good Shabbos to Michael. Here we have Howard Bernheim. Rabbi Shem Tov, thank you for all these inspiring words. Good Shabbos to all. Thank you. Thank you for your kind words. And here we have Harris. Shabbat Shalom to one and all. Thank you from Karen and Harris. Karen Harris, good Shabbos to you as well. Layla, thank you for another inspirational Shabbat Shalom. I really appreciate the chance to participate in these online because it's not possible sometimes to be in person. Well, Layla, that's exactly why we do this. And although, as I said, the pandemic is moving on, hopefully, thank God, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't take the good things that we've experienced in order to be able to grow forward. Let's take just one or two more good Shabbos greetings. We have one more just came in from Susan Cohen. Shabbat Shalom to all. Stay safe. Susan, good Shabbos to you. Thank you for joining and thank you for participating. And because Shabbos is coming and we need to get home and get ready, I want to sign off and wishing everyone here a good Shabbos and use this Shabbos, be inspired, grow spiritually, grow internally so that we can grow eternally and that we're able to make not only our faith stronger, but meaning of life, the purpose we live, and everything we do. Good Shabbos.